Hi. Hopefully you remember our 7-part series on the West. These are lengthy, roughly 50 minutes each. This is a 20-part series on Tales of the West. And for those pressed for time or a short attention span, these are 8 to 10 minutes apiece. Each is focused on a specific event or person from the era. Episode 1 is on the Mountain Man. We will post 2 episodes a week, so please be on the lookout. The reality and the myth of the Mountain Man form one of the earliest images of the West. Seen here, the lone figure laden with beaver pelts, cautiously working his way back to a camp location, and the presence of other free trappers. The Mountain Man hunted and trapped mostly in the northern Rockies between 1810 to as late as the early 1880s. However, their peak years were between 1820 and 1840, when an estimated 3,000 trappers roamed the wilderness. Plenty of meat. This is a compelling image of a mountain man with a fresh kill and, all too infrequently, enough meat for him and his companions. Sometimes Michael Coleman, the artist, paints Michael Coleman into the scene because, as he says, it was a good day to be there. That is the image that we are looking at now. Coleman is a multimedia artist: oil, watercolor, gouache, etching, and sculpture. He grew up hunting, fishing, and trapping. His work reflects 2 loves: contemporary wilderness and animal life, and historical images of Native Americans and mountain men. For the most part, relationship with the Native American tribes was friendly and based upon trade, and mountain men numbers were small and no threat to Indian lands. In the earlier days, the mountain men would occasionally team up with a local Indian as they pursued the beaver. It often worked well, but when violent encounters occurred, it was usually over the belief that the trappers were poaching what the Indian believed was rightly his. In fact, there was more conflict between the American fur trader companies and the Canadian Hudson's Bay Company as numbers of trappers employed by these organizations competed for access areas rich with beaver. Things changed. The demand for beaver pelts back east dropped as women's fashion tastes changed. It is estimated by 1848 only 50 trappers worked the traditional Snake River region compared to 500 in 1826. One of the most endearing images of the mountain man is the annual Rendezvous, which attracted up to 450 to 500 raucous and wild American and Canadian trappers and a number of Indians along the Green River in Wyoming. The sculptor Bill Nebeker represents the rarely depicted French-Canadian trapper. The detailing of his mountain man garb is superb. The subject suggests he's attending the annual rendezvous. However, wherever he is, it seems fairly certain he's enjoying himself. The rendezvous became the major social gathering of the year. Business was conducted, items were traded, necessary supplies like coffee, tobacco, gunpowder, and traps were purchased, but the most important thing was whiskey and a lot of it. On a smaller scale, when it was too cold to trap, winter quarters would be established, affording these free trappers an excuse to gather around the campfire, eat, tell tall tales, drink, and, as you see here, even dance. Paul Kelly, commissioned by NASA in 1962, was the only artist to cover the famed Apollo astronauts. Greenwich Village born, he pursued a highly successful career as an illustrator. Cali received an assignment by the National Park Service, which took him west and allowed him to witness an elaborate Hopi Indian rain dance ceremony. When the ceremony finished and the dancers scattered, a thundercloud formed over the village and it rained, but nowhere else in the surrounding region. That moment, this Stamford, Connecticut resident totally changed his focus as an artist. Cali adopted and all but owned the mountain man as the center of his art. If figures of mythical proportion need a face, well, Paul Cali has given us that face. This is the quintessential mountain man during the 1830s. Paul Cali sees a strong connection between the astronauts he so brilliantly represented and the mountain men he immortalizes as a painter. Quote, "They both set foot where no man traveled before. They both risked everything." Well, I can't help when I walk past this piece in my home thinking of Robert Redford's role as Jeremiah Johnson. Perhaps the two most familiar figures from this era were Jim Bridger and Kit Carson. Bridger went west in 1822 at 17 years old. He was among the first mountain men to see the geysers in Yellowstone and the Great Salt Lake in Utah, initially believing he had discovered an arm of the Pacific Ocean. Kit Carson's reputation as a trapper and explorer came as the guide for the John Fremont exploration of California and Oregon. Carson and Fremont are pictured here, in California, on their way to survey the Columbia River. Fremont's tale is one of extraordinary exploration and surveying from the Mississippi River to the Pacific. He was instrumental in California achieving statehood. He got into a dispute over his position in California, was subjected to court-martial, resigned from the Army, returned to California, found gold on his property, became a millionaire, became a state senator, and ran for president. Kit Carson became a favorite hero in dime novels back east, with many of his exploits contributing to the myths of the West. As we close out this segment on the Mountain Man, I'm tempted to ask if there is one image or face to represent the Mountain Man. This is it. Thank you for watching our first episode, The Mountain Man. Be sure and look for number 2, The Frontier, and the introduction of the preeminent Western sculptor, Harry Jackson.